Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. I am here today with Leighton Gray for one of our speaker featured interviews. So, Leighton was raised in Edmonton and attended the University of Alberta. He has earned degrees with distinction in arts, English literature, and law. He started his own law practice in northeastern Alberta back in 1995, and that has since grown into a firm of 12 lawyers with offices all across Alberta in Cold Lake, Edmonton, and Calgary. The firm is known as Gray Walk Spencer LLP, of which he is the senior managing partner and head of civil litigation. He's received many awards and distinctions for his work on behalf of First Nation people and is also a member of Carry the Kettle First Nation at Sinalatua SK. Since 2020, he has acted as lead counsel in several high-profile constitutional cases, including the James Coates and Grace Life Church, Timothy Stevens and his church in Calgary, the vaccine mandate cases involving CN, CP, AHS, and the U of A, Mount Royal University, as well as others. Most recently, his firm has launched national class actions on behalf of the unvaccinated and prosecutes many Indigenous rights cases. He created, writes, and hosts a podcast called Gray Matter, which is broadcast on the Daystar Network and covers a variety of hot topics. It can be found on YouTube, Spotify, and other social media platforms. So if you like what you hear today, be sure to pop over there and listen to more. Thank you so much for joining us today, Leighton.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
We are here to kind of discuss a little bit about you, give an intro to our listeners, as well as kind of hear more about why you are interested in the work that we're doing here at Reunify and with the Reclaiming Conference. So before we jump into all that, I would love to hear a little bit about your background. What got you interested in studying law?
Well, I think as a young person, my main interest was in literature and history, and those are the things that I excelled at in school. Actually, when I went to university, I wasn't really sure whether I was going to get into law or go into graduate studies and become a professor. Fortunately, I was offered a couple of master's programs in English and history, and the more time I spent with academics, the more I realized I wasn't well suited for that vocation. And so at that point, I decided that I would apply to uh, to law. I only applied to one law school, and I was fortunate. I was granted early acceptance to the University of Alberta, which was in my hometown of Edmonton. And I wasn't a very affluent kid growing up. Couldn't afford really to go away to some other place to study, and so that's how I ended up at the University of Alberta. I didn't enjoy law school very much. I think this is a common experience for many people who attend law school. They have expectations that they're going to be there with a lot of smart people and have really interesting conversations. But it wasn't, it didn't turn out to be that way. It was a very sort of a dog eat dog situation, everybody trying to get ahead of each other, people stealing each other's notes. And so I was pretty pleased to get out of law school. But it was after I started practicing law that I really developed an appetite for it. And I realized that it was a vocation where I could use sort of my natural skills and be challenged every day by a type of work that was constantly different, constantly changing and challenging. A person who bores easily, and I love taking on new challenges. And the practice of law has presented that to me every day for the past 33 years. And so I've been very grateful to be, and I've always felt privileged to be a lawyer. I still feel that way. And I'm very grateful that I've had the opportunity to serve so many people, so many clients over the years. So overall, that's sort of been my experience in the practice of law to date.
Interesting. Okay, so as you've been building your career in law and your firm, what are some core principles that have kind of guided your approach to advocacy?
Well, I think one of the key ones is I don't think unless you have a strong desire to help other people, I don't think you're going to last in the legal profession. The lawyers I know who have gone on and had great careers had that sustaining idea that they're client centered and they're there. They see themselves as service providers, so that's really key. Secondly, you have to really like challenges. And you have to really like the idea of problem solving. That's a big one. And then I think the third one is you have to be someone who is a constant learner. I think those people who get into the practice of law and find after a while that it's mundane, they don't last. But those of us who have been in practice for a long time really are constant learners, and we have a curiosity about the law, and we enjoy providing service to people. And we have a real addiction to solving problems, which is a convenient one. It's actually it's been described as a form of useful psychopathy, if you will. There's a great book out there that people might want to read. It's called The Wisdom of Psychopaths. It describes people like lawyers and firemen and other people who do difficult jobs, strange jobs that other people might find really hard on the brain and distasteful. For example, in my case, I once represented a man who killed his wife with a hammer, crushed her skull with a hammer, and then stuffed her into a wood chipper. Most people would not want to spend any time with that man, but I found the idea of representing him as this lawyer something that actually was honorable, not in a moral sense, but in a legal sense. And I learned a lot from taking on clients like that. And so I think that to be a good lawyer and a good advocate, the big part of it is you have to put away your own prejudices, your own emotions, and you have to focus on the job before you and do it to the very best of your ability. You have to sort of compartmentalize your mind, which is a sort of a way of a positive, a useful psychopathy. If you were undergoing brain surgery, you wouldn't want to have someone opening up your skull who is horrified at the sight of blood. You'd want somebody who had no more emotional response to cutting your head open than they would to opening a juicy melon. And sort of as a lawyer, it's the same way. You have to be dispassionate and focused on the law and the facts and your role as an advocate in that process, and resist the very powerful temptation to prejudge the case, to judge your client, because of course that isn't your role. That's the role for the jury and or for the judge, depending on the case.
So, did you find it easy to step into this mindset, or is it something that you've had to learn over the years?
That's a great question. There have been times and certain types of cases where it's been very difficult for me. For example, in cases involving, child exploitation, sexual exploitation of children. As a father, I found those cases difficult, and because of that, I stopped doing them. I found that I wasn't the right lawyer. Someone who's an accused person doesn't want or need a lawyer who is morally conflicted about representing them, and so I've stayed away from them. But I think it's something like other aspects of being a lawyer that I've sort of grown into over time. And it's a skin that sort of grows into, almost like, the calluses that a farmer would have over time from working in the fields.
Interesting. And as you've kind of pursued this constant education, what is most effective, do you think, in your particular profession? Is it just learning by experience? Do you have a mentor? Do you read books? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, I'm a voracious reader. I probably read uh, or consume 3 books a week, whether reading or audiobooks. And I've had tremendous mentors. Very, very blessed to have had tremendous mentors, and both in terms of understanding the ethical side of practice, but also the practical side. And I've also been blessed to be around lawyers who are good businessmen. And that's an area that unfortunately many lawyers neglect. We get wrapped up in doing the job, but if you're in private practice and you're not taking care of business, you don't have a practice that can be sustainable, you're not going to be able to help any clients. So I've been very fortunate in a number of respects. But I think the big thing is I still enjoy what I'm doing every day. I still find it challenging. And the other thing that's been extremely rewarding is mentorship of young lawyers. I've had now 11 students. I have another one who's starting in the fall to make it an even dozen. And that's been one of the most rewarding experiences of my whole career, if not the most, is sort of passing on what I know. And also, I learn a lot from these young people who come in bright-eyed and eager and wanting to learn. Anyone who has been a mentor or a teacher knows what a tremendous learning opportunity that is. And it saddens me that more lawyers aren't taking up that role today. It used to be a time-honored tradition in the practice, but sadly, that has changed, and that's one of the things that I lament. That I think we need to get back to. If we're going to restore Canada and reunify Canada, that's one of the aspects of the legal profession that I think we could work on.
Interesting. So how has the legal landscape been changing across Canada, or even just like in Alberta specifically?
Well, I think the biggest change during my career has certainly been the advent of technology.
Mm.
When I was in law school, I graduated in 1992, and we were still, I mean, we're early days. This is, before Windows. And so we were going to the books, we were going through the stacks to find cases and references and things like that. And of course, today it's been completely revolutionized. Everything is digital. We have cameras and microphones in the courtrooms now. And of course, the big thing that's changed everything is the internet and now AI. AI presents at the same time perhaps the greatest tool for lawyers, but also perhaps the greatest challenge. There's a great temptation to rely overly on it. And so that's going to be something that is going to have to be worked out in the coming years. I had a guest on my podcast recently who is an AI expert, just wrote a book about it, and he said that the foundations of learning are going to be completely revolutionized in the next 3 to 5 years by AI. And of course, law will be no exception. Some people even think that AI will eradicate the legal profession entirely. I don't believe that. I think that AI is more of a tool, but I don't think it can ever replace the traditional role of a lawyer in terms of being an advisor and being an advocate and being somebody who essentially helps people through legal problems.
Interesting. So, in terms of the development of AI, do you think that it could be used as an asset in the legal profession, or is it primarily a threat to it?
Oh, it's a tremendous asset if it's used properly. I'll give you an example. It can be a great time saver in terms of research if you have a particular legal question. But you have to be duly diligent about it because the one thing that AI does not know how to do is to say, I don't know. And remember what
Mm.
Socrates said when he was told that he was the wisest man in Athens. He says, well, if I am the wisest man in Athens, it's because I know that I know nothing. Now, he wasn't saying he didn't know anything. He was saying he didn't know it all. And of course, AI doesn't know it all either. And the problem is sometimes if it doesn't have an answer, it will create one, it'll fabricate one. And so, one of the things that lawyers really need to be careful of when they use it, for example, it might tell you that a certain case stands for a particular proposition. You still need to go and look at that case and verify that the way that AI has represented that case is accurate, because sometimes it's not. In fact, sometimes it's completely wrong. It's completely backwards, and so you have to be very careful with it. But it is a tremendous time saver. It's a great tool, and I think it's only going to get better. But as I say, I don't think it can ever replace, the mind and the skill of the lawyer when he or she is applying their training and their understanding of the law correctly.
Absolutely. So, I'd love to talk a little bit more about your team there in Alberta. So, you all have taken on a lot of controversial and high stakes cases. So, what is it that
Mhm.
motivates you all to engage in this type of work?
Well, again, coming back to, challenges, my practice, I'm very fortunate that I've been able to do a number of different things. I've sort of remade myself about 3 or 4 times now. I started out basically as a lawyer doing the whole host of things that you would do in a small town practice. And then I got very focused in criminal law. I did very high level, heavy criminal cases such as murders, sexual assaults, robberies, heavy drug cases, and things of that nature. But when COVID-19 happened, when the pandemic happened, that really was a game changer for me, and I realized that something was dreadfully wrong with our country. And that, of course, that was also the sort of the crystallizing moment for the conference as well, for the reunifying conference. And that's the genesis of it. I think since then it's really expanded, and also sort of in a parallel way, my law practice has expanded, and so now I become very focused in class actions. We've got one that's going through the certification process on behalf of unvaccinated Canadians, so potentially 7 million class plaintiffs. As you can imagine, the government of Canada is defending that one, opposing that one vigorously. But we're going through that certification process, and that's going to resolve hopefully sometime in the spring. We also have a number of ongoing cases involving loss of employment. A lot of people are shocked to hear this, but even as people like Bonnie Henry and Teresa Tam are being anointed with the Order of Canada, there are still many workers who have lost their jobs years ago and are still fighting with employers over the fact that they lost their jobs because of a vaccine mandate that, of course, we all know now or should know is completely unnecessary. So I have a bevy of those cases. And then the other part of the rest of my practice is taken up by my Indigenous rights cases. I was involved in the original Indian residential schools class action. I was involved in the settlement of that back in 2006, and I represented hundreds of plaintiffs in that process. My grandmother, my great aunt were students at Brandon Residential School. I'm an Indian myself. My father was Treaty Indian, and so this is something that's very near and dear to me. And my firm, I'm focused now on doing a number of. We have I think 3 or 4 different residential school type class actions ongoing, or Indigenous rights cases. And so with those, in addition to the podcast, that takes up most of my time.
I'd imagine so. Do you find yourself under public scrutiny often because of the controversial nature of the cases?
Yes, this is something that I've had to accept, and
Mhm.
again, it's difficult. In 2020, I experienced a pretty severe cancel culture attack. The CBC and Global called me a racist, a misogynist, and every name in the book because I questioned things like Black Lives Matter. I said that I thought that George Soros was going to try to use his money and influence to impact the 2020 presidential election, which he did. By the way, we found out that BLM actually stands for big luxury mansions. But the big thing that got me in trouble was early on in the spring of 2020, I saw Justin Trudeau and his government monkeying around with something called the Emergencies Act. And I predicted that they were going to use the COVID-19 pandemic as an excuse to invoke it, which we all know they did. But that was the one that got me into a lot of trouble. And so I got kicked off a prestigious Law Society board that I served on, and I was publicly vilified. I was removed from a board that from a provincial appointment, which was essentially I was on a board to select judges. And of course, they didn't want anybody who was a conservative selecting judges, perish the thought. And so, but that process was very difficult. And since then, I've been under pretty constant public scrutiny, more than I was used to before. But I've learned that that sort of goes with the territory. And of course, I'm very guided in my faith. But also, I always think of what Winston Churchill said. Of course, he had so many great quotations, but one of them is, "So you have enemies, good. That means that you stood up for something." And
Mhm.
so, if I'm on the side of Winston Churchill, I fancy that I'm in pretty good company.
Absolutely. And I think that's a lot of what's lacking in society today is just a willingness to take a stand on anything, you know? Don't
Yeah.
dabble in the gray area, commit and let the
Pardon the pun.
consequences happen. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, and
Exactly.
this is what I notice about many of the speakers who are at this year's conference, as well as the ones who have been there in the past. I didn't make it last year, but I was there in 2022, and the
Okay.
people I met there, many of them, as you know, are the type of people who are just not afraid to say the truth and to stick their necks out. And really, I think that sets an example for all Canadians that we need to follow more so than ever right now with the government that we have in Ottawa right now and the challenges that this country is facing, both domestically and internationally and culturally. We really need a grassroots movement. We need people, everyday people, as it were, really getting involved in their communities, and attending conferences like this and connecting with other people to talk about some of the challenges that are facing our country.
Absolutely. So kind of circling back a little bit to thought leadership, what is a specific policy, or is there a specific policy or legal precedent that you would like to see challenged or reformed in Canada?
Well, in this respect, I'm sort of echoing what my good friend Brian Peckford has said. And if people don't know Brian Peckford, he's the oldest living signatory to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. He actually developed some of the provisions in it. And he's been on my podcast 3 times. He's also been a speaker at the conference on multiple occasions. And what Brian says is that we have to restore the rule of law and the supremacy of God in our country. And that wording, by the way, is in our Constitution. But what he's really saying, and what I echo in what Brian believes, is that what we have right now in Canada is a crisis of values. When I was growing up in Canada a generation or two ago, I had a pretty clear sense of what it meant to be a Canadian. I had a pretty clear sense of my rights, of my duties, what it meant to be a Canadian. I felt sort of an amity and a connection to other parts of the country, even places I'd never been, even Quebec and the Maritimes, which are very, very far from Alberta. I sort of felt a guiding sense that we're all Canadians, that we had this shared bond, that we were united under this maple leaf and under these shared values that are articulated in our Constitution and elsewhere in our culture. I find that over the past 10 years, particularly since we were beset by the Trudeau government, which did so much damage to our country, that Canadians haven't necessarily lost those values, but they've become obscured. And I think part of it too is because we have so many new Canadians. We've had a massive influx through immigration. And so these many challenges from many different sort of sources have created a crisis of values in Canada. And I think that the best thing we can do through this conference and through being involved in a grassroots way is to get together and talk about those values and reaffirm them. Because I think unless our country and Canadians in particular can be united in their sense of who we are as a people and as a country and as a nation and what our values are, what we stand for, what we represent to the world in terms of our cultural or national identity. Unless we can do that, we really don't have much of a country. And we're going to continue to sink into, this disunity where we have, for example, Alberta speaking seriously and taking action towards independence. And so what my hope is that through conferences like this one and people getting together to talk about our values and to restore those values, to sort of renovate them, because I think the only way we can rehabilitate Canada. Rehabilitate is a Greek word that means to restore again to dignity. I think that's what needs to happen in our country. We've lost a sense of our dignity. The only way we can do that is by talking to each other and listening to each other, and putting in the work that it's going to take to make Canada great again. Sorry to use that slogan, but it's so apt. We're so blessed in this country. No country in the world, in the history of the world, is blessed in the way that Canada is. And I believe that God has done this for a very specific purpose, and he didn't do it to destroy the country. I believe fervently that he has a great, great promise, future ahead of us. But in order to get there, we're going to have to do some work. We're going to have to work to fulfill our potential as a people and as a nation. But I think that the only way we're going to do that is by restoring these values. I happen to believe that those values are the Judeo-Christian Western cultural values that made the West great. It made countries like Canada and the United States the envy of the entire world. There's a reason why every day around the world, millions of people are trying to come here, literally risking their lives to get here. There's a reason. But we owe a duty to ourselves, and we also owe a duty to newcomers, people who are coming here, recent newcomers to Canada, who are coming here thinking that Canada is a certain kind of nation. Well, those of us who were privileged enough to be born here have a duty to those newcomers. Instead of vilifying them and saying, well, you shouldn't be here and you're not adding anything to the country, what we should be doing is trying to live up to the promise of our nation, try to be the kind of people that we're supposed to be, to fulfill the promise to the people who have come here from other parts of the world. And I think if those of us who are, let's call us old stock Canadians, can do that and be welcoming to newcomers, but also set an example to them and show them, okay, express the values of what it means to be a Canadian. I think that that's what's going to make this country stronger. I think part of the problem, people blame everything on immigration. Immigration is not the problem. The problem is that the newcomers to our nation are coming here and they're not being imbued and they're not being shown a specific idea of what Canada is and what being a Canadian is. And I think that the idea of being a Canadian is a wonderful thing. I think it's an attractive thing. And I think if we express it well and we show that to newcomers who come to this country, they're going to get excited about it and they're going to want to be part of it. And that's only going to make Canada an even greater country than it already is.
So, how do you view the role of lawyers in kind of shaping this type of public discourse?
Well, I think again, it's values. Lawyers should be thought leaders. I think we have a duty to uphold the law, but I think we have a duty also to show good values. And unfortunately, um, the values that dominate the legal profession right now are not the ones that are expressed in our Constitution. Um, I think that the law has become too secular. I think and in that sense, it's become divorced from reality. And the best example of this is our Supreme Court. The role of our Supreme Court is to uphold the Constitution and to express the values that are in the Constitution, not to make new law. That's not the role of judges. Judges are not elected, they're appointed for life. They're appointed through a politicized political process. And so the judges should be resisting the temptation to make law because having elites make law is obviously undemocratic. And it hasn't served the Canadian people very well. The Supreme Court over the past couple of generations has spent more time creating new rights for people like LGBTQ, for people who are foreigners, for criminals, for even Indigenous rights, which frankly are go against or set Indigenous rights in opposition to the rest of Canadians. All this has done a great disservice to Canada, and so I think those of us in the legal profession um, more than anyone else, perhaps, we need to show, the right values. We need to have these values and express them in our courts and also in crafting laws that reflect the vision of the country that we share and which is expressed in our Constitution.
So, in line with that, constitutional expression values wanting to get lawyers kind of on the same page as, we need to be more proactive about promoting traditional Canadian values. Is this what inspired you to start a podcast and to be more public about your opinions on these topics?
Yeah, I think that was the impetus for it. Also, obviously, in Canada, we have a great problem right now in terms of getting at true and accurate information.
Mm,
Because
okay.
as
Why
you
do you think that
know,
is?
well, it's a combination of things, but unfortunately, and this is not unique to Canada, but the mass media has become corrupted
Mm,
by political forces and is very leftist in its approach, and the left does not value truth. The left does not value reality. It values politics. It values its own ideology, and the problem in Canada has become worsened because Justin Trudeau and his government decided to essentially take ownership of mass media in Canada, so that all the newspapers and all the major television stations and so on are all now beholden to the government. Of course, we have the CBC, which is nothing more than an echo chamber for the government of Canada. And the values that are being expressed by that government in Ottawa, I don't think are the values of Canadians. I don't think that Canadians want to give, $10 million to promote, gender climate initiatives in Vietnam, a country that just has rejected communism altogether and become really a model of capitalist growth. I don't think that Canadians want to have $15 million spent by this government promoting gender diversity in Kathmandu, which is actually happening right now. And so I think that the problem that we face with the media is that, and then of course the government is also passing laws that are restricting our access to news on platforms like Facebook. And so the podcast was the idea was to get people exposed to the ideas of great thinkers, people whose ideas were suppressed. And so we were very fortunate to have people like, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya come on the program early on when he was still being essentially suppressed and censored on X and other platforms. Of course, he's gone on to become the head of the NIH in the United States. So that was the impetus for the podcast, and it's really grown. But I think what our focus is to provide true information to people, but also to have real discussions. We want to show people that, you know what, it's okay to have a discussion where you might say something that offends somebody else. We have to have those kinds of discussions. John Milton, in his great treatise on free speech, Areopagitica, which was written in 1651, the basic premise of it was that the only type of speech that needs to be legally protected is that which could give offense. We don't need to protect other kinds of speech, but we need to be able to talk about things, because otherwise we can't have a meaningful conversation about anything, right? We can't have a debate, whether it's political or at the kitchen table at Thanksgiving. We can't have an exchange on social media if we're worried about someone filing a hate speech claim with a human rights tribunal because they want to get a quick $20,000. By the way, that's another liberal law that's coming right down the pipe. So there are great challenges to podcasters like myself, and we're going to have to see how this all unfolds. But one of the big things that I think is happening, and I think it's a good trend, is that Canadians have never been less trusting of the mass media, and I think that's a good thing, because very little of what is true is being reported there.
Interesting. Have you come up against censorship within your podcast, or is that something that you foresee being an issue down the line?
Oh, absolutely. And particularly during COVID, we couldn't say anything about the vaccines. And so YouTube was particularly bad. They've gotten much better since Mr. Trump became president. Of course, when Twitter was Twitter before Elon Musk took it over, it was a real problem. And so what we still have to be careful. We have to be responsible. Um, the big thing that we try and do with our podcast is we don't launch hateful attacks on other people. We try to speak the truth. We take on ideas. We separate out the ideas from the person. So for example, if I write, and I write a new commentary for my show every week, and if I write something about Mark Carney, I don't talk about Mark Carney. I don't call him names. I don't call him a scoundrel or whatever. I talk about him and his policies, the policies of his government, and how I think they're good or bad for Canada. And I think that's something that his government is trying to suppress. They don't want to be exposed to any type of criticism, even if it's honest criticism. And that's something that every Canadian is going to have to stand up and fight for, because free speech is sort of the first of all rights, because it's the only one that you can use to win back all of the other ones.
Absolutely. And that is a lot of what has motivated We Unify to do what they do, right? Is
Right.
because we want to try and preserve that opportunity for conversations and for people to
Mm.
be able to disagree with one another without being canceled. So I would love to hear a little bit about how you got involved with We Unify and why you continue coming back as a speaker.
Well, I was invited to come in 2023, and through Jonathan Bauer. I'm not sure how he got my name, but he contacted me, and he said, "Look, I think that you have something important to say. We'd love to have you come and be part of the conference." And so I went to the conference in Victoria. Of course, it's grown a lot since then, but I met Jonathan and some really incredible people. My wife and I really enjoyed our time there, and unfortunately, we couldn't go last year. But this year, with it being in Calgary, no, we really couldn't say no. And I think that this is probably the top conference of its kind in Canada. And I think, with the leadership of Jonathan Bauer, I think that over time it's going to become one of the biggest in the world. And I see that, he's now bringing in guests from all over the world, not just from Canada, but also thought leaders from the United States and Europe. And so I think that this is a conference that is only going to grow and grow, but it takes people getting involved in it and supporting it. And so I'd love to see really packed packed houses there. Not necessarily for me, but oh, that would be great. I'd love to see lots of people there when I'm speaking. Um, but I would love to see a response, and I believe that the people of Alberta, especially Calgary, are really going to support this. I think that Calgary is an ideal place to have a conference like this because I can tell you as an Albertan, we are freedom-loving people, maybe more so than anywhere else in Canada. But not, the whole independence movement notwithstanding. And I say independents and not separatists, by the way, because Albertans are not separatists. They're in favor of independence. And I say that because what the Alberta independence movement, which I'm close to, is trying to achieve is really conservation of the values that I've talked about here during our conversation. Our vision of Canada, we see it being encroached upon and destroyed by the government that's in Ottawa, by the Liberal government that has been in power since 2015. And the Alberta independence movement sees independence from Canada as the only alternative, the only way to preserve the vision of Canada that we hold dear. Now, that may not be true. And perhaps this conference is going to persuade Albertans that independence from Canada is unnecessary, and that in fact our vision of Canada can be restored and rehabilitated within Confederation. I certainly haven't ruled out that possibility. I know many within the Alberta independence movement feel the same way, but it's going to take a tremendous national grassroots movement to change the things that we don't like about our country right now.
Mm. And would you say that this is a beneficial conference for people who are just learning about all this, who are wanting to find resources to better maybe get involved in the independence movement or become more educated on discourse and how to have conversations based on your experience?
Oh, absolutely. What you're going to hear are very engaging people. Many of the people who are going to be at this conference have been guests on my show. People like Bruce Pardy, who is one of the top constitutional thinkers in Canada. People like Viva Fry, who's been on my show, and many others. These are people who are, first of all, are very engaging speakers, very interesting people. And I think, to my mind, perhaps the most enjoyable experience I had when I was at the conference was when I was part of a panel where we could actually go back and forth and bounce ideas off each other. And I noticed that the audience is really engaged with that. I think that's a natural, of course, human beings, we're just highly developed primates, right? We're social beings. And so, when the audience is there and there's a panel that's debating something, it's almost like, they're standing around the kitchen table when when there's a discussion or argument going on. And
Mhm.
so I find that to be a great learning experience.
Mhm.
And also, one of the things that happens at this conference, which doesn't happen everywhere you go, is the open mic process where people get to engage and to have a Q&A with some of the people who are speaking. And also the access to the speakers, I think, at this conference is really unparalleled in comparison to other ones that you might attend. And so I think there's just tremendous value on a number of fronts to attending this conference.
Wonderful. Well, we are so excited that you are coming back and joining us again. And thank you for your time here today. To our listeners, if you all liked what you heard and you are interested in hearing more, feel free to visit our website, reunify.ca, to check out tickets and details on how you can get involved with our conference, as well as checking out Mr. Gray on YouTube and Spotify for his podcast. Thank you so much.